This is my 1987 BMW K75. It's literally just got back from its MOT, where they've told me that although the brakes are really good on the brake rig, there's a slight binding in the front. So I'm going to dismantle the brakes, and using my Christmas present of a Total Bleed Solutions reverse bleed kit, check the brakes and bleed the brakes. So I'm just using the bike tool kit, which has got everything that I need, and this bleed kit, which is 2 syringes. I've also brought a big bottle of Castrol .4. Now ironically, if you buy this from Halfords, a bottle that size costs the same as a bottle half the size, so I might as well buy that and do a couple of cars at the same time. The first thing to check is the lever itself and that it returns correctly. There's no sticking there. Before Christmas this actually seized in that position. I'm just taking the top off the brake reservoir, and I'm using the screwdriver off the bike because it fits exactly in these screws. They're not quite Phillips and they're not quite Posi-Drive, but this is exactly right. The screws are different lengths. The 2 at the front are the same, but the one at the back is slightly shorter. Just lift that off. It's got this little concertina inside it to keep it under pressure. And the brake is looking pretty brown, so that needs to be done. That's what I've just taken out of the master cylinder, and you can see it's pretty brown. It should be really clear, so it's definitely time to change that. I reckon the last time I changed it was about 7 years ago. I'm just going to take the calipers off both sides so I can get at the pads, and I'm using the extension bar on the Allen key because this is pretty stiff. You can actually flick these covers off first if you want. I usually take them off after I've got this off. The 2 retaining screws are out now, and I can move this. If you rock it from side to side, that loosens it off, and then you can just bring it round. Now the caliper's out, you can see how thick the pads are, and you can compare them to a brand new set of EBC. And you can see they've got plenty of wear left in them. The rate I ride at, that's years and years of wear. But I want to take them out and I want to clean everything up. I've also got some of this brake paste that I can use to lubricate it to make sure that it doesn't stick. If you just ping the plastic cover off with a screwdriver, you can look into the back of it and you can see there's a bit of corrosion in there that's actually on the spring. The ideal thing would be to take those pins out, which you just tap them through with a hammer, clean them all up and paste it and put it back together. If you're doing this roadside for whatever reason, you can use this as a hammer and just tap it out with this and then pull them out with a pair of pliers. So get hold of them and turn them and pull them out. When you're taking the pins out, remember that this pin in the middle, the pivot pin, is free and will drop out, so don't lose it. That's all the parts out. You've got the 2 carrying pins, the little pivot and the spring, and even though these are rusty, they don't actually impede the action of the pads. If the brake is binding, it's because it's binding in here, so that will all need cleaning out and just making sure that it's not rusted up. Note that there's a little retainer ring on these pins, so make sure it's in place and not damaged, otherwise it will rattle out. So that's a shiny one against the old rusty one. Definitely not weather for working out on the drive. It's not actually necessary to take the calipers off the disc in order to clean and change the brakes. But the reason I've done it is I wanted to drop it down so I could see this connection. And you can now see that this is really quite corroded. Now, if that was visible during the MOT, it would have failed. What is visible is this tube, which I've painted with Hammerite. If that was rusty, that would fail. So I want to clean all this back with a wire brush and then treat it with Hammerite so that it's in good condition. Because I can't quite get at this, I'm going to take the back half of the fender, the mudguard off, There's a plastic cover that comes off, that just rotates out, and then there's a hex head bolt in there, and you also have to undo this connection here because there's a plastic lug that's in there behind it, and then this should just drop off. This little Allen headed screw has got a nylock nut on the back, so you need a 10mm spanner to be able to undo it. I've got the worst of the rust off with a brass wire brush, so it's now looking a lot shinier. I've got a hand brush as well, I'll go over it with that, and then I'll make sure that it's really clean before I actually paint it. I've put on a really thick coat of hammerite. It's really cold today, it's less than 0, so it's going to take ages to cure. So I'll do the other side, and then I'll clear off indoors and have lunch. And I'll put a fan heater on it to help it dry. When I first got this bike 20 years ago, a common upgrade was to change these pipes for braided hoses made by Girling. Nowadays there's a huge selection to be made. And it's probably a really good upgrade. The only reason I haven't done it is every time I take it for an MOT, they tell me how fantastic the front brakes are. Putting it back together is the reverse of taking it apart. I'm going to use this brake paste and paste the back of these pads. It's anti-squeal paste, and all the other parts I'm going to actually coat in copperese. Copperese is great stuff, it lasts for years and it stops everything from corroding and seizing. Put the 2 pads in, drop the front pin in and push it through, and then locate the spring and then tap that in so that now cannot come out. Then you've got to put in the pivot pin and tap in the second pin while pushing down on the spring to make sure it all goes back together in the right place. So now they're all in the correct place and ready to go back on. Now the reason I do it like this is because I can then put this onto the disc and use the disc to space the pads. If the pads were brand new, they would be closer together. It's really difficult to push the calipers back in, but this way you can just wind this slowly on like this and make it fit. That's all cleaned, lubricated, reassembled and put back on, and now we need to do the reverse bleeding. Now the principle is you take a syringe like this and you pump the fluid from this end up to the master cylinder and suck it out of the master cylinder until it's all perfectly clean. Now the first snag I've come across is there is no way that that is going on that bleed nipple. It's freezing cold today. I'm going to have to go and get some hot water and soak this until it's really soft so that I can force it onto there. I've put in some boiling water and tried to form the end with a Phillips screwdriver in the hope that that's then going to fit. I finally managed to get it on. I need to leave it to set now before I take it back off, because obviously when I use it I have to fill this tube up completely with oil so there's no air bubbles. I can't just connect to the end. Use a ring spanner to undo this because otherwise it tries to wring it off. It is quite stiff because it's quite old, but that's now loose, and then put the pipe onto here. So if you hold the tube on with your hand and then carefully inject it, it should slowly rise to the top. Obviously the way I've done it, you can't easily put a cable tie on there. I want this on so that I can shut it off at the end. One whole syringe full brings it nearly to the top, so I've now got to suck that all out and do it again. So that's one half of the system, because this is now fresh clean oil. When we do the other side, this will go dark again and then clean again, and then the job will be done. It's completely flushed with clean oil now, and the level is just under the max. I've put the top back on. Now's the time to pull the lever. And that's pretty good. It mustn't be able to come all the way back to the handlebar, and that is feeling really solid actually. That's good. The only real way to test it now is to give it a little road down the road, But I won't be doing that today because it's about -3 at the moment. The bleed kit did the job, so I'm not going to complain about it. It was only £6 and I'm going to get loads of use out of it. The only thing I would say was, from a bike of this size, really you need syringes that are twice the size so you can just do it in one go, and this tubing needs to be a larger bore. I had real problems in reforming the end of the tube with hot water and a screwdriver to actually make it fit properly. But again, you know, he pays your money, he takes your choice.